drafters, and the number of legislation that we have currently, it's a lot that we have to revise. And capacity, it's our human resource, it's just already depleted. So we have already started the process with Commonwealth, and we intend to work with CTU as well to see how we can get some assistance or some sort of collaborative process that we can get this process going.
Don't forget to talk to Cleveland as well.
And ITU, okay, thank you. We'll talk to ITU as well. Yes, because I remember in the whole concept with HIPCA, ITU was the one who was managing that whole process. Yes, and I remember you were there. Sophie. So it's like we have these international bodies that we are looking to so that we can get assistance from you.
And just to add to that before giving to the other judges, don't forget the whole EU push post-COVID, the Team Europe approach. You have the the LAC summit coming up. Don't forget what I said in my presentation yesterday. Make sure you go and talk to the EU delegations so that this is seen as a priority, that it's integrated into the LAC summit. It's really important that it comes bottom up from the countries. So please do go and talk to them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so you had some really good slides there. There was some very, very good teamwork. And I'm sure we all got some ideas. So I think quick tip, anything that we raise, don't change your presentations, please.
Okay.
Because, you know, it's kind of like this is the guinea pig, and we don't want, you know, unfavorable conditions happening downstream of the industry. All right, so first thing, SVG. I like that you tried to address some of the concerns by putting a bullet points that said international trade agreements, but you didn't tell me what. All right?
Okay.
Now, I want to know, what do you see as a group as the important trade agreements that we are party to as a CARICOM, or if you have bilats as SVG that will enhance the company that you're representing, which is the fintech company, yeah? Did you find, what's the correct name? I'm such a very bad executive member. I don't know the name of my own company. Did you find? All right, so that's my first question. You want me to give you all, or you want to give?
No, let's take one at a time.
Let's handle this heavy one first.
Yeah, let's handle this heavy one, which I'm going to ask a team member to help me with here, because I think we talked about it.
Anybody could talk, because I think Vashti has mics around.
Thank you again. I'll just mention three very quickly. There's the EPA, the Economic Partnership Agreement with Europe. Of course, there's CARICOM agreements, and more on a bilateral basis. It depends on who you have diplomatic relations with. In our case, Taiwan is a big partner for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, so we have a number of trading agreements with Taiwan. There are others, of course, but those are three of the most significant ones.
Thank you. And the second thing I wanted to ask, you had some slides up there on the legal and regulatory environment that you were looking at, and just in particular from the side of trade facilitation, what provisions you'll envisage trying to prepare for consumer concerns and competition in the market for the company? And also for the country, what exactly do you envisage as being necessary there? And have you anything in place at this time, the legal framework at this time, to address competitive concerns and consumer redress in SVG?
I'll start and then you'll complete. We currently have the consumer, and I think I mentioned it there, the Consumer Protection Act, which would help to protect our consumers. But in terms of the whole competition policy, we have not really reached the level that we want to. And I think that is one of the reasons we were having the conversation with you yesterday, to see and establish what mechanism we can put in place to deal with competition back in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, especially when it comes to whether it's the ISPs, which is the service providers and so forth. What can we put in place to protect basically your citizens from being abused by these entities? Mr. Knights from the NTRC would add some more to this.
Yes, good morning. I'd just like to add to Simone. Yes, for the competition area, as you mentioned, we just passed our Electronic Communications Act in October. So it should be proclaimed soon, in effect in a few months. But that has a number of provisions dealing with competitive issues, but just for the telecom ICT sector. So at least that's a good start, but we don't have an overall broad-based competition bill act as yet. But that's something we plan to work with your institution. Hopefully we can help in that other area going forward.
Okay, we're having a lot of cross-fertilization in the exercise with, so I think we need to just cancel the the VP thing and just go with who we are. I want to ask you one last quick question. Bearing in mind that you are part of the OECS region and you are one of the only regions, one of probably about the top 3 regions who have a successful central bank, a CDC, a central bank issued currency, Dcash. I want to know from that perspective, what do you see as being critical in your legislative framework to not just help you with bank issued money, that's digital money, but also with all of the things that are happening in the fintech world right now with cyber money and cryptocurrency, which is a little bit different from the cyber money. So that's an important one for any company engaging in global trade now.
Well, we have already started with the whole legislation about the electronic funds transfer. And of course, that will cover the Dcash stuff because you're moving monies from one wallet to the other, etc. So that would also cover that. It's a little bit unfortunate that the Dcash has not really propelled in the way that we anticipated in the OECS, but we are still looking at ways in which that whole aspect of but it's mobile money, moving money from one wallet to the other, Dcash, or another one may come up soon, who knows. But we still have some foundation on which we can use those. In terms of cryptocurrency and so forth, we do right now, we do not really have any proper, I should say, legislation in place to really cover that. Unfortunately, I would say here, and I hope that Commonwealth and even with your entity, TCC, and also CTU, where we can get some assistance here, because currently I'm just going to make a pitch here that we have a case where in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we are promoting the young people to use e-commerce to do their trade and so forth, online transaction. But we do not have a way where we can actually collect the monies, the funds. And one of the things we were looking at recently is how we can get our SMEs to conduct their businesses online by collecting funds, for example, via PayPal. And we cannot at this point do that. And it is a hindrance to our development in that fintech industry, because you have these great developments, but how can you go past this obstacle that you have? So this is something that we really have to look into. So if you have any areas that you can help us with in that, we would welcome it. And our Honorable AG would add some more to that.
Thank you again. I'd just like to add 3 points to what Simone said in relation to your question. The first is, of course, having a carve out a space for developers, so a sandbox type provision where we could let people fiddle around and test these products without impacting the main system. The Dcash is a sort of central bank digital currency that has been issued by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, and that has to be treated differently. But in that regard, one of the things that's very important is a system for ensuring the transactions, so that if there is some sort of fraud or something, the person who's using that central bank digital currency knows they are protected just as much as if you're using fiat currency. So that insurance, deposit insurance, or whatever phrase it's called, is very important to give confidence and trust to the persons in the market. We, of course, also passed the virtual assets service providers legislation, which is very critical. But one of the things is that this area is still very much emerging, even in jurisdictions like the United States. There's a lot of debate as to, is it a security? Is it a commodity? All of those things. So I think we also need some degree of certainty on a global level in order to be able to effectively and properly regulate these types of transactions and these types of assets.
Just one question and just one comment. First of all, fantastic presentation. I thought, I've got a list of things I was looking for. You were ticking them all off as you were going through the slides. I think they're really, really good and really interesting looking at your legislative kind of existing framework. I thought that's a really good approach. I really like the fact that you include your trade agreements. That gets missed off by a lot of governments. It's seen as domestic legislation, and that outward-facing approach is so important for business. I'm coming from obviously a business perspective. So my question is, you mentioned harmonization. In industry, in the trade environment, we're talking interoperability. And there's quite an important differentiation between harmonization and interoperability. Is there any reason why you are talking in the language of harmonization and didn't mention interoperability?
I don't know if there's a specific reason why it wasn't mentioned. I think we were really focusing on how we can all do this together without having varied legislation that would set us aside or set us apart from doing business together. So it was more or less how we can actually do this together. Because, as well, sometimes it might be a case where we might not have to approach an international trade that we want to do with just by St. Vincent by itself, because the islands, they are small, the population is small, so we might have to work together with another member states in order to facilitate certain types of trade. So it was a matter of how we can work together to do all this international trade.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. I actually think interoperability fits better in an island region environment. That interaction across the economies. My only comment, my one comment was around standards. It's great that you're talking international standards. I think that's absolutely vital from an international business perspective. But please do think beyond ISO. ISO is only one of many different standards that everybody has to adopt. It's actually all about the standards toolkit from the WTO, ICC, and ISO is in that toolkit, but that sets out the framework for government and industry. So if you can think, when you're going into your stakeholder engagement, encouraging everybody, it's a powerful message that we're all adopting, one framework that fits, of course, your harmonization, interoperability objective as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Vashti, how are we doing on time? Is it? Right, okay. Great, thank you. Then we will wrap up on that note and thank the St. Vincent and Grenadines for an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Game on. Competition is tight this morning. So we are now going to move on to our online or virtual team that is going to put up their presentation and go through it with us right now. I can just hand over to AV so we can put up their presentation on the screen.
Good morning, everyone.
Barbados Country Reports, and I'd also like to invite the online moderator. I'm going to hand over to you so you can go on and present.
Good morning, everyone.
And kindly introduce yourself and the members of your team.
Good morning, everyone. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we are, Michelle.
Okay. My name is Michelle Warner Morris. I am a part of Group A. My colleague, Desiree Zachariah, and we have Rudy Daniel and Sanja Douglas as a part of our team. Xavier is also a part of our team, and it is certainly a pleasure for us to present to you this morning. The country chosen to represent is Antigua and Barbuda. And we will attempt to show you our current position in Antigua. And the vision here in Antigua is to ensure that all government services are available online. Sounds like a simple statement, but a very big task as we go through the presentation and show you our various strengths and areas of opportunities with just ensuring that all of our government services are available online. For our current status, we do have some legislation already in place, such as our Data Protection Act of 2013, Electronic Act of 2013, and the Digital Asset Business Act of 2020. What we also want to highlight is the connection or the connectivity within our government services. And in order to do so, we have a national data center where all of the information is collected and is readily available for government agencies across the board. The DCash project is also in its pilot phase to facilitate our e-commerce business. Instances of digitalization of government services. One of the pluses for us is that our port of entries, we can say, has gone ahead and is in a better position than most of the other areas. And so our custom and exercise division is fully digitalized. Our ministry, which is the Ministry of Information, has also sold and has made it a point that our government understands now the importance of not only digitization, but digitalization. And as recent as last year, because of the importance that has been garnered from that, our ministry's name has even taken a change. And so now we are not only known as the Ministry of Information, Communication, Technology, but we are also added digitization as part of the name for our ministry. And I think just having the government make that change has emphasized the vision of where we want to go and the importance of digital transformation in Antigua and Barbuda. As a result, our ministry has gone ahead and has made several changes in the introduction of the online renewal for something as simple as our driver's license. I remember a previous speaker spoke about taking a negative and ensuring that we capitalize and use it for positive. And so COVID has really taught us quite a bit. And as a result of having the vaccination requirements during COVID, we have gone ahead and built on that using the negatives of COVID and have now introduced the vaccine management. And because of the vaccine management and the program that was utilized, we have now used that and has taken it to another level in the introduction of a national health database building from that vaccine program that was introduced because of COVID. The digitization of output of records. Our ministry has now an entire digitization department with a count of a minimum of 40 persons. And what we have done is now use that department, and we have gone out and have gone into various other ministries, utilizing the skill set from the trained data analysts that we have within that department. And we are now placing those SMEs into various government sectors and are executing, digitizing legacy files, as well as bringing the current files online so that it can be a continuous project. And that has worked out to be a magnificent opportunity for us, not just selling the importance of digitization, but having the ability to give the bodies in order to do the work. Proposed instance of digitization, we have worked with the cabinet dashboard. We also have an online citizens portal. We are also working with the civil registry, bringing our birth records, death records, and all of that online. And that is a work in progress. But we are very pleased with the fact that the buy-in has come from various agencies, and we are able to move the digital transformation, starting with these specific agencies. Next slide, please. Gaps and challenges. Just like the previous presenter spoke of, there's always hesitation, buy-in for anything that is new. And so we too are facing that sort of lack of buy-in in some instances. There is a lot of hesitation where digitization is concerned, and the unwillingness to move away from the paper records that they're so used to. Stepping out of your comfort zone is usually a very, makes people uncomfortable. And so the education on why digital transformation is important, showing the benefits, the efficiencies, and all of that that comes with making that change is something that our ministry is constantly selling, and the importance of how we will see the changes, positive changes, if persons get on board. What we also find is an aged infrastructure and limited resources. And the previous presenter also spoke on something similar, where we find ourselves, because of it's a new initiative, we are starting from scratch with everything. So the change takes time. The people needs to get on board. And then we also have to look at the finances that is required to get the job done. Software is costly, and we have not yet developed the capacity to generate same within our country. So we have persons that do have the skill set, but if it's not financially feasible to them, they may not be coming to work for the government, but they're going to the private sectors because it's more rewarding for them. So now we find ourselves having to not only invest in training for our people, but ensuring that those investments, we are getting the return on the investments, be it through scholarships, where persons understand the importance of coming back and giving back to our government sector and things of that nature. Need for improved policies and legislation and standards. And yes, we have policies in place, but it has to be fluent where we are able to make the changes as the market evolves. And that is an area that we are still struggling with. And as just kind of hinted on, the ongoing revision of the legislation from the top, where all of the key stakeholders understand the importance of us not just putting legislations in place, but there's a constant need to change so that we can continue to grow and build on what we currently have. The adherence to international standards and good practices, that is one that we have to be very diligent and consistent in enforcing, holding persons accountable, getting persons to understand that we are not just catering for our local market, but on an international standard level as well. And we are saying that In order for us to do so, we are looking at a long-term plan. And when we say long-term, it has to be a structured plan where no matter what change, we can see this, it's a continuous situation. We are looking at a long-term plan between 15 to 20 years, medium 3 to 10, and then the immediate 0 to 2. And this is for our IT developmental plan, which includes the output for the government, private sector, opposition, and the citizens alike. And we think that having that is going to make a big difference. It's important that for a small island as Antigua, that certain things will not be able to be accomplished on our own. We seek the market for the entire OECS, looking at it from the OECS rather than just Antigua. And if we are able to collaborate our efforts in certain regards, I think we would make a greater inroad rather than trying to do it in silo and on an independent level because our demographics are so small. A model to attract in-country coders. And yes, we do have some, but the resources are very limited. And we know that it is important to have those skill sets in place. Develop talent, not just from a coding perspective, but for IT professionals across the board, because it's a broad scope of requirements and professionals that are needed. And I think greater investment has to be placed in getting those things in place in order for us to be successful. And then we are saying, if it's not readily available in Antigua, then we can look at it on a regional level where we can use our networking mechanism to garner those skill sets from our sister territories and, make ourselves successful. In order for us to do and accomplish all of that, the framework has to be very structured. And for us, we need to focus our priority on the sectors, which is health, education, agriculture and security, and our national development goals. If we are able to target those specific areas and build from that, we think we would be in a good place where country-wise, if the focus is placed in those areas. And those are some of the recommendations we have. We go on to the next slide. My colleague Desiree is going to also interject here and add some additional information for the recommendation slide, and then we will move into our question and answer.
Good, everybody. Just a matter of augmenting. We do, in addition to the 3 aforementioned acts that have been implemented, we have implemented several others, and we include the Electronic Crimes Act of 2013, the payment systems, which is the eCash, which is what we're currently using for the clearance of funds, being headed by the ECCB. That's the Payment Systems Act of 2013, the Electronics Evidence Act of 2013 as well. We were very busy in 2013, Credit Reporting Act of 2017, and we have other associated legislation such as, the Customs and Control Act, because that's the Trade Act, which the act, not the Trade Act, the act which gives Customs the authority for exercising its facilitation of trade, the Telecommunications Bill, and we have one which is of 2021, which has, I think, recently been passed, and several others. Essentially, what we're saying is we are Antigua and Barbados trying to build the framework. In fact, Antigua and Barbados has recognized some since the early 1990s that IT is here to stay. And we, first of all, we sought to train members of the civil service, either through the non-established workers or the establishment in IT. Things IT, so you have basic training using the computer skills. So you have increased skill set. We created an Antigua and Barbuda International Institute of Technology. We created, which provides up to associate degrees in IT subject matter. We did it through the ABIS program, which provided for evening students who went to school during the evening, students who were disadvantaged and had not been able to finish their normal schooling by obtaining their high school diploma. We are currently doing it through the landed campus in Antigua and Barbuda, the 5 islands, UWI 5 islands. So we recognize that training is essential, and we have put several things in place. Unfortunately, we, like most OECS countries, have limited financial resources. We do have a tremendous amount of talent, so we have the human resource, but like everything else, the human resource we need to support our families, and therefore, many people choose to go to find the job which best facilitates their needs, and as a result, they will choose to work in private sector, or they will choose to provide services cross-border, maybe rather than working for the government. In addition to that, we do have trained individuals who are bonded in Antigua, who are bonded to Antigua and Barbuda, because we do have a tremendous amount of scholarships available, and those scholarships allow the skill set, and a large number of scholarships go to training in information technology as well. So from our perspective, we do have a framework. It may not be as defined in a national IT plan or national goals, but it is available, and we have put several things. We have addressed several of the elements required to ensure that we try to attain our vision of having all government services available online. And I suspect we have not set a date to that. That is something that has to be developed by the Ministry of Information.
Thank you, Desmond.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Antigua and Barbuda, for the excellent presentation. One of my round of applause, yes. It's the land of 365 beaches. Did you know that?
I didn't, but it sounds fantastic.
Yes. So we're going to reverse the order a bit, and Chris, if you please take it away.
Yeah, thanks very much for another great presentation. There's some real aspects of the presentation I really like. I think your recognition of the mindset behavior challenge ahead of us is spot on. I think actually that's the number one challenge that we often don't talk about enough. And I think recognizing it's a challenge is halfway to the solution. I think that's fantastic. I really appreciate that. I also liked your short-term, medium-term, long-term approach. I thought that was brilliant. Particularly in the short term, I'll come to that in a second. We need quick wins under our belts to build that assurance, the confidence, the momentum to then move into the longer term, medium term stuff. I also really liked your focus on sectors. I thought that was really useful. I think the more focused we are, the more likely we are to get movement going and progress. So I've got one question, one comment. And my first question is, there was no mention of trade. A lot of mention of public services, but the trade, and specifically the trade environment, underpins all of our public services in terms of the movement of goods, services, and finance, and the products and services that we use across the public services. So the question, you mentioned customs, but why no mention of the wider interoperable trade environment?
We mentioned that in passing, in the sense that we do have our platform for payment, payment in country through eCash, as well as through Dcash. And we do have several institutions in Antigua who are piloting Dcash, the ECCB Dcash. Trade in terms of, in Antigua and Barbados right now, much of the commerce is online. So if you look at the last Christmas season, the Customs and Excise Department, which monitors the trade, it regulates the trade, they will tell you that lots of things now currently come through online procurement. Traditional trade goes on as usual. Much of it is online, and this has to be managed to the banking system, and their eCash facility facilitates that as well. All right. So we have our normal trade legislation on our normal trade agreements govern how we trade. So as far as I'm aware, we still have the trade with our trade agreements with the European Union, the EPA, of course with CARICOM. I know that we have an agreement with the OECS Pharmaceuticals for procurement of pharmaceuticals, a regional procurement facility. We did have Caribbean, and to be honest with you, I'm not quite sure of the extent to which that is operational at the moment. We have our trade with Colombia. We have our other trade facilities. I think there is one available with Venezuela as well. Now, not only do we have in our trade, at the moment, we have our harmonized legislation, but we also have legislation to allow for interoperability. And that is going to be seen through our citizens portal, which is currently entering. In fact, we have signed a contract with software suppliers to provide that. And the intention of that is to be able to allow for government services to provide for citizens to provide to obtain services from the government, but by providing information in one spot, and that information is going to be verified by the owner of the data. So, for instance, if we wanted to get services from the Social Security Department, the owner of that data, which is the Social Security Department, will verify that you are an eligible recipient. If you wanted to get service from the medical benefit scheme, and the medical benefit scheme is equivalent, it is not quite, but it's the equivalent of our national insurance. So that if you go to the hospital and instead of having to pay regular prices, commercial prices for a doctor's visit, you pay $20. Now, however, it has to be verified that you actually are eligible, because we remember Antigua and Barbuda has a large tourist economy, and there are lots of persons who come in, and we'd want to make sure that the citizens benefit, and citizens and residents, that is, and people who have subscribed to the medical benefit scheme benefit by paying $20 for their services, as opposed to other persons who are required to pay the commercial prices. It might be $300, $500, what have you. But it is the owner of the data that needs to verify that you're eligible, which is the medical benefit scheme. And as Michelle had mentioned, the driver's license scheme, we want to be able to, once you have applied for a driver's license and you have received the driver's license, and then ongoing renewal is done online. You'd have to verify, obviously, that you are who you purport to be. Then you have the passport facilities, being able to apply for a passport once your documentation. Once you apply for the passport and then you provide the necessary documentation, it can be verified by the passport office because they are the owner of that kind of information. So we are moving towards an interoperable system and ensuring that the legislation allows for the passing of information from one agency to the next. And that, as indicated, that agency, that the information, when the information is passed to the the agency, that agency verify whether or not you are a valid user of the services, because we are very aware of that cybercrime is on the rise. We are very aware that information can be used by nefarious persons.
All right, thank you. We're going to have to leave that one there so we can take some other comments from the judges. Navia, and then perhaps Sophie, and then I will give the final.
Okay, thank you for that presentation, Group A, I believe it was. So I just want to be very, very quick with you. I'm noting the focus on the bringing into the modern era your public sector. I wanted to know what mechanisms do you see as being there to facilitate trade with your private sector as well, within your national economy, and to bring in external trade? And let me let you answer that really quickly, but I do have two other small ones, but I think I'll give you one more just to add to that one. Give me your idea of your compliance with your obligations for not just interoperability, as Chris raised, but also for trade under regional, sub-regional, and international treaties. For example, even something as small as movement of nationals, because I think that's an area that could probably assist Antigua and Barbuda, because you highlighted that there's a dearth of some of the skills that you need to bring you forward into the digital economy. So I think that might be it for me, just to make sure that I have time for Sophie to ask her questions. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay. Currently in Antigua and Barbuda is a part of the OECS, and one of the benefits of that is that we have free movement of persons between the countries of the OECS, which means that we can get skill sets from various countries of the OECS. Persons come to live in Antigua and they don't need to get the necessary work permits. In addition to that, we have noticed that there's a large migration of persons from other CARICOM countries. From Jamaica, we have a large Jamaican population, a large population of people from the Dominican Republic, from Guyana as well. And most of these are skilled many of them, I should say, are skilled persons, university graduates, who bring with them their necessary know-how to assist us in building our systems and our economy. Within recent times, although it has been quite controversial, we have had the benefit of a number of Africans coming to Antigua and Barbuda, and many of them are skilled persons. These people have master's degrees in telecommunications, in science, and those will help to augment. Now, the thing is, do we have a program in place to attract these persons? I don't know that we have a program in place as much as we have an economy which appears to be a little bit more buoyant, because as far as I'm aware, we have one of the most buoyant economies in the OECS. And that in and of itself, if you find that you can have a job in an Antigua and Barbuda, which pays you a lot better than in your home country, you will migrate to Antigua and Barbuda. And that is what we have been seeing. So we do have quite a large immigrant population who have been integrated into our society and who bring their skills and know-how as well. Our legislation, of course, has to follow to make sure, and in fact, the legislation has been passed because we have an amnesty program which gave amnesty to a number of people who have been living here for many years, who have contributed, but who have had to work off the book, so to speak, because they were not bona fide national residents of the country.
And don't forget to answer the part about the private sector initiatives, because you're focused on the public sector.
Concerning the private sector, what the government is seeking to do is to provide the framework on which the private sector can work. So I know that the banks, for instance, one of the challenges that the banking industry finds is that they often have issues with correspondent banks. Those are things that are facilitated through can be facilitated through the government. And those are done primarily through the ECCB. So for the banks, it's through the ECCB. Other areas for the private sector, let's suppose we wanted to have, for telecoms, you have legislation which manages the telecoms. In fact, one of the pieces of legislation we have is a telecoms bill of 2021, I believe. Right now in Antigua and Barbuda, we have one of the things that the government recognizes, and unfortunately, small services which are required by the general populace, services like utilities, those of necessity are must be provided by the government, because private sector is in the business of generating revenues and profits. So if a sector or an area is not profitable, they will not invest in its development. So the government has to ensure that that is done. And they do that either in several ways, either by giving incentives to the private sector, or they do it by providing the services themselves. And in some instances, what they do is they do public-private partnerships. And that is one of the things that is available right now with the telecoms. We do.
Okay, sorry, I just want, we have 2 more judges for you, so I just want to make sure we have time for those questions. So I want to thank you for the answer and pass over to Sophie.
Thank you very much, an excellent presentation. I have a comment, a question, and we have, as Rodney said, run out of time. So if you could really answer it very shortly and concisely. It's excellent. Congrats to envisage bringing the government services online. As we saw in COVID, it's very important. I also thought it was great that you addressed the connectivity, but really limited to the government services. I think one of the things, bringing government services online, that's of course access, but you need to think about adoption and value creation. So have you really thought about how in your implementation plan, you set an IT development plan, have you thought about the use, so the skills development of the people, making it inclusive by design so that persons with disabilities can also access the government services? Because when you bring government services online, suddenly everybody has to submit their taxes, for example, online. If you don't think of persons with disabilities, now you're creating an even bigger gap. Also the affordability of devices, have you thought about that? Because again, if people have to access government services online and they can't afford the devices, have you thought about that? And finally, government services online for what? For the value creation. So really have you thought about innovation, job creation, really how government services online can benefit the people? So I took a long time to ask my question, so I'm asking you to be short in answering the question.
The answer concerning affordability of services, the answer to that is yes. And in fact, the government last year, in 2020, spent quite a bit of money in providing devices for students and for teachers. I know that there are access centers in almost every village in Antigua and Barbuda, and that has been done by design. The access centers allow anybody to be able to access the internet. So that's what the government has put in place in terms of affordability. So not only do we provide services, we also provide devices. Concerning the disabilities, yes, there has been quite a bit of effort to address this. In fact, as recently as I think late last week, we attended a workshop for a project which looked at having to deal with disabilities in education. Right now, government buildings are being built or retrofitted for disability access because of the cry or the requirements of the disabled people. In terms of jobs creation, during the pandemic, there were several projects, one of which was a project for women who had been specifically displaced as a result of working in tourism, women who worked in tourism who had been displaced as a result of the pandemic. There was a series of training done for them. They were given devices to allow them access to the internet because all of this training was online, and those devices were provided free of cost, and the training was free of cost to the individuals. We have gotten tremendous amount of feedback, and in addition to that, the whole Antigua and Barbuda Investment Authority has implemented a training facility dealing specifically with small business, small and medium enterprises.
Thank you. I'm going to stop there. I'll make the final comment, and also thank you for the excellent presentation. I observed, though, that you spoke about the different sectors. There wasn't a mention of tourism. I know that tourism contributes very heavily to Antigua and Barbuda's economy. And there's been a move very recently as well to promote digital nomads and all of the supporting infrastructure that these digital nomads will need, such as robust infrastructure, access to services, and so on. And besides direct input to the GDP, there are indirect spin-offs of tourism. So I would just also encourage you, because you mentioned linkages to national development goals, and I'm sure as much as we want to diversify our economies, we still have to be mindful of what are the major economic drivers and how digital can impact those existing sectors. So on that note, I would thank you, and we may have time for the other.
Yeah, the group, could the virtual team just turn on your cameras so that we can have your official group shot taken? Virtual team, there we go, that's one. The other members of the group, if you can.
Sorry, my camera's not working right now.
Okay. All right, that's two.
I'm also not video appropriate, so my apologies.
All right, so let's just take the picture of your members.
Smiles, nice smiles.
Big smiles, big smiles. Thank you guys so very much. It was an excellent presentation. Very, very, very comprehensive. Thank you. And now I'm going to invite the team from Team TT and Tobago, whoever is your designated moderator, you are invited to take the floor.
Conflict of interest declaration. I'm a national of Trinidad and Tobago, but that doesn't mean that I'll go easy on them. It means I'm going to go harder because I know TT well.
Good morning, everyone. Are we still in morning? Yes, okay. So whilst they put the presentation up, I want to say good morning to our SG and 3 deputy SGs of DigiFind. And Trinidad and Tobago is more or less ready once our presentation comes up. Well done to all past delegations for their countries. All right. So my name is Solange D'Souza, and I'm from the Office of the Attorney General and the Ministry of Legal Affairs, and we're here to present our Trinidad and Tobago National Country Report, State of our Country's Legislative Framework. All right, so yes, feel free to focus on our graphics. We shine well. All right, so our current status. I'll get you all settled. I know I'm the one in between lunch now. So we'll go through these in more detail. We have our political directorate. We'll speak of Vision 2030. We'll speak of our policy for creation of Ministry of Digital Transformation. We'll speak to our current legislation. And of course, we'll talk about that estimation of 90% of our government being people-based. So we go straight into it. Our political directorate, captured under our policy document of Vision 2030, is that pillar on digitization. And in theme 4, we have the building of our global competitive businesses. And under that is our goal, where a business environment, we want to make it conducive to entrepreneurship, investment, and trade. Continuing on our political directorate is a collaboration that happened in 2019, where our Honorable the Honorable Keith Christopher Rowley, who's our Prime Minister, met with Her Excellency, the President of Estonia, and I do not want to try to call that name. I don't want to mess it up. However, they had very integral conversations with regards to making Trinidad and Tobago a digital first nation. Following in 2019 was also a step towards creating our e-cabinet. So I don't know how many countries as yet have it, but Trinidad was quite happy to see that our cabinet ministers could have their cabinet notes and minutes electronically saved and forwarded to them in a very secure environment. Of course, this move significantly reduced the paper dependency of our cabinet, and therefore deepened the use of ICT within the government. And we can't do a presentation without talking about COVID now, yeah? So within the times of COVID, we would have seen where our Prime Minister, again, found a very poised position of creating our digital transformation and the roadmap towards recovery, thereby underscoring the need for the actualization of digital-first government. So as we go forward, we speak about our Ministry of Digital Transformation. A mandate was set, and then we moved into the preparation of our national digital strategy. Again, remember, we're still on current status, so all these things have happened and is actually continuing to occur. In 2021, we'll just drop down there a little bit, the National Digital Inclusion Survey was done by our Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, of which we have representatives here today, TACT, and also the UNDP came in and did a digital readiness assessment report, and I will go a little deeper into that when we speak towards the recommendations. All right, so the big question of legislation. So all these pieces of legislation upon the screen, they're just really a very small amount compared to the gambit of legislation that we're looking at, either to change via miscellaneous provisions or via standalone legislation. However, most of these that are highlighted here are the ones that touch and concern each other with regards to digitization and digitalization. Together with these, however, would also be our trade agreements, and our trade agreements are done specifically under the Solicitor General's Department of the Attorney General's Office, so that SG and Deputy SGs, when you start to speak towards those, we may have to take some of those questions home. I'm just prompting them, for what may come. I'm not too sure. But yes, that is a very specific department with trained attorneys that deal specific to our trade agreements together with our Ministry of Trade. Remember, I'm from the Ministry of the Attorney General. Yes? So I just want to touch a little bit on our Computer Misuse Act. So our legislation, as much as, and we'll speak about it a little further as well, when we speak about people feeling very secure online, our Computer Misuse Act has a bit of history. In 2014, we started with our Computer Misuse Amendment Act. And that traversed into our present, and we went into probably, I think it was 2017, 2019, we changed our cybercrime legislation. And right now, because it failed within Parliament within those times, and I'll tell you why it failed. It failed because there was an issue with the media thinking that what was being proposed did not allow them to keep their sources of information confidential to them. So we had a bit of a discussion and consultations with them, and that caused our bill as well to be a 3/5 majority bill. And so that kept us back from being approved even in a joint select committee to going forward at all. So what we did is that we reformulated our computer misuse, our cybercrime bill into our Computer Misuse Amendment Act, and we're trying to skew it more towards what I will tell you, what the Budapest Convention resembles. And the idea, once we have buy-in from the powers that be, would be to create that bill into a simple majority to get an easy pass, so that we're now looking at protecting those who are online from the cybercrimes that can be committed. Of course, our data protection, electronic transaction, telecommunications, all tie in and touch and concern our forward movement legislatively for digitization. It's not on the screen, but I just want to highlight that government ministries have already partnered with the TTIFC. I think you also, Mr. Outridge, on. And those ministries that have already signed on would be the Ministry of Works and the Judiciary in particular, and also the Immigration Department. And they're going to sign on very quickly, because then you're going to find payments being made online, even through PayPal. I think someone was discussing PayPal. So you're going to find that we're integrating more ways to have e-money and e-cash moving around in a safe environment. Yeah, so we could move on. Do you guys see the paper in the back? I just want to highlight that, unfortunately, we are still 90% paper-based, and we're hoping that through the passive of our legislative framework, that we're able to have all that shredded paper dealt with, and we're more so interacting on e-platforms. All right, so our gaps and challenges. So again, we just have a few of them here, and I will touch on them briefly. So we have a lack of regional legislative harmonization. Most of our old legislation we found did not touch and concern what other countries within our region have. And so right now, we're having those discussions to make sure that we have less of a gap when it comes to legislation. Then we can speak to partial proclamation. Let me just go back. It's moving faster than me. IT, can you assist? I'll talk about it by the meantime. So partial proclamation. So a lot of our legislation right now, because we deal with it in a miscellaneous provision bill, we find that parts of it can be proclaimed, parts of it cannot. Standalone bills are assented to, but upon proclamation, we could only do that in a piecemeal format, and that tends to happen sometimes because of a lack of human capacity and sometimes the financial resources. I'm not even touching it, and it's moving. So IT has to go back for me. So basically, with those proclamations, what we want to do is to shorten the gap that we take. Shorten that gap that we take to proclaim our legislation. Then we have some outdated legislation, so we're dealing with that, and that may happen because of our evolving digital space. Our lack of coordination. Someone spoke to it today about silos. A lot of that happens in Trinidad and Tobago as well. Our ministries sometimes are not coordinated with each other, and there itself is a challenge. And then there's the lack of legal capacity and more so limited digital literacy. So a new age, and sometimes you find that the language that we speak is a little different. So the digital literacy isn't there as yet. All right. Okay, great. So our recommendations and the best way ahead as we would see it. So again, we spoke about the harmonization, and we want to foster that collaboration between our drafters of policy and our drafters of law within the region. That conversation is something we want to encourage. We want to encourage increased funding. So DigiFind, that's why we're here to you. But we also have other partners that they're able to assist. So even when we're on the platforms globally with meetings, we're talking to the UN, we're talking to Commonwealth, we're talking to CARICOM on a whole to find out where else we can get proper funding from, and funding also to increase that training of technocrats, to increase technology neutral legislation. And sometimes we might just need a little training in that as well to know what language we're speaking. And then, of course, cross-sector collaboration, which will help deal with the silos. Of course, we can embrace digital technology like we're doing right now. And I think what's very, very important is the sensitization and education to help build that trust factor as well. And we'll do that properly through public awareness. But like my permanent secretary said, that last point about communication strategy and having that sensitizing of member states and public of national ICT plans, it's very important, because you don't want to be disheveled and all over the place when you have a plan and nobody knows what that plan is. So again, it prevents us from working in silos. And this is my last slide. But I think it's very important. I just want to point out two of them in particular. That once-only legislation to enhance user experience and security is something that I think I heard the last speaker speak about it. And that's something that we're moving towards, something called a unique identifier or a unique identification number. And so back home by us, we have our ID number, we have our passport number, we have our number on our birth certificate, we have a number for our license. You understand? So that once only legislation is really to make us have one number that when it's pulled up on a system, we can get all the information on that individual. So that's very, very important to us, and legislatively, accelerating our legislative reform will help us get there. Also, our cloud policy, a lot of people are talking about the cloud, and I would mention that there's an issue on jurisdiction and sovereignty when we speak about cloud policy. So that's a whole other discussion that we might need more financing for. But it's very important to us that we understand that it balances data security with data openness. And our increased infrastructure and access to telecom services is something also very close to our TAT and Trinidad and Tobago on a whole. Lastly, continued tax relief on computer devices and continued internet access in schools. That's something that is happening now, but we think the recommendation on it is to please let it continue to happen. All right? So I think that I could wrap up and just say thank you very much for your kind attention. And of course, if you need any more information, our very worthy Permanent Secretary, Ms. Natasha Barrow, can assist. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trinidad and Tobago. Full points for graphics. So if you fall short in any other area, you've made it up there. I'm going to start with Sophie.
Thank you very much, Rodney. Great. Switch between the judges, right? So congratulations, excellent presentation. I really thought you addressed very many points. There were a number of issues that were really key, one of which speaks to my heart a lot. Is the cross-sectoral collaboration. So that is really important. We all recognize that digital is cross-cutting, so that cross-sectoral collaboration is key. Two questions. One, have you thought of measures to really, because my thing is sustainability, right?
Yeah.
So cross-sectoral collaboration, it depends on the people, it depends on the champions, but you also need the mechanisms in place so that it remains sustainable. So that when people come and go, you have that in place. And then secondly, I like the school connectivity, all the access, but I think like with the last presentation as well, it's really about not just the access, but the use and the adoption. So really think of that inclusiveness of the digital skills, basic and advanced digital skills, so people can actually use the ICT to get a better life, so that you really become a digital nation. So it's question common, but welcome to answer.
Okay,
that.
so I'll take that last comment first, and hopefully I remember the first comment when I have to talk about it. So that question on the accessibility for schools and making sure that that it is something that is sustainable. Just last night, the Permanent Secretary was talking about that and talking to TAT to see if there can be partnerships within the schools where at least, just to start off, we have at least one subject being taught online. Because I mean, for us in the Caribbean, it could be a little expensive with the service providers in particular that we have at home, probably looking at how much bandwidth they may be using within our nation's schools. But at least if we can start off with, I think one of your deputy SGs was speaking of the low hanging fruit, the small wins, or I think it was Chris. And so that would be a low hanging fruit for us to possibly have one, at least one in our primary and secondary schools, one class being taught online. So that's something that will help with sustainability. And I think your first question / comment spoke towards more or less the passing of the baton to make sure it is sustainable still with our cross sector. I think that is possibly why the Honorable Dr. Rowley put forward a ministry to deal with digitization, because it's very heavy. It can be easy, but yet very complicated, because a lot of people have to be having conversations. Because right now, Ministry of Digital Transformation, together with TAT, together with, well, the Attorney General's office, of course, we're working in collaboration. And so that collaboration has to be handled hand in hand with each other. So I think with the formation of the ministry, that helps us. Thank you.
Madam.
So this is my fear.
This is your fear?
Yes.
Sorry, Nivea, just
Go ahead.
I just wanted to add another comment under digital skills.
Sure.
And I think it's a very key initiative for us. And we want to continue with our digital education programs that we are currently undertaking, programs especially geared towards specific population groups, the elderly, persons with disabilities, the very young, and so on. And we want to continue with those type of educational programs. Sometimes we do it 2, 3 times for the year. We want to continue, probably have even more programs with our national libraries, through these schools, the Ministry of Education, and so on. So that's a very key initiative in building skills.
Thank you very much. Yes, that's true. Yeah.
All right, TNT. Number one, you talked a lot about a very small portion of your public sector. So from trade and trade facilitation.
Yes.
What is Trinidad doing with the ASICUDA or any movement for digitalization of customs and security of international and intra-regional trade? Big issue for trade facilitation, because I am the Assistant Secretary General of a digital company right now. The second thing is movement of nationals. how are we compliant with movement of national skills? Same question I asked Antigua and Barbuda, and I know I'm asking because I already know the answer, but how are we moving internally, seeing that I have AG here, to ensure movement of national skills with people coming from other islands with particular skills? And I know you said you have to defer to other members of your chambers, compliance with international treaties, CARIFORUM, EPA. We've fallen short since I was at TAT, which is many years ago, authorization, reciprocity, comparability with what's happening in the EU for authorization of ICT sector, of electronic commerce, UK CARIFORUM, which is about to be tied up. We're going into second tranche EU EPA negotiations. Trinidad and Tobago is the hub for lower region. We've fallen short. Computer devices, tax relief. Tax relief on computer devices. We had lots of presentations earlier on the fact that computer devices are no longer, my Wi-Fi doesn't need a computer device at home. It just needs the smart box. Cable TV is just a little smart box now. You don't actually have to have, well, you certainly shouldn't have copper in your countries, but you no longer have to have fiber optic. So why the fixation on just devices? Why not expanding a little more? And you can't answer it, and I know that. Intra-regional and international trade, ease of business. Trinidad and Tobago is not where it should be on the WEF reports.
Okay.
So you can't say that you are the hub of business in the region. Look at WEF, look at our competitiveness, look at our ease of business, and we've got to pick it up, all right? And there's another AG in the room there, so I know he's recording notes to go back to the OECS and make sure the next time he see me, he don't get buff.
All right, so I'll take them as questions as opposed to a pull-up. So I will address what I can, because you know what they say, you stay silent unless you open your mouth and prove yourself to be, So, so I will answer what I can. What I can tell you with regards to the tax, that first came about for two reasons. One, students needed laptops in school. We were on that drive at a point in time, and especially with COVID, a lot of classes were online, and the Ministry of Finance, through BIR, I think it was, saw it very fit to lessen or take off some taxes. So the fixation came about because of that consciousness. So that now it can be developed to encourage taxes of certain, I don't want to call it infrastructure because I was pulled up on that word earlier, but the taxes that could be lessened on other services is something that we could look at. And I think that that is where even our passage of legislation could help us, because our definition of computer and our definition of computer device is so very stoic, it's so very limited that it doesn't allow us, if they say on computer devices, and we look at where the legislation is, it could do with some widening. So I take that as a point home as well. With regards to trade and us being a hub, I think I'm going to have to leave that for trade. And I think I'm going to have to tell them about it. With regards to the AG's office, I think you were asking with our agreements. Yeah, again, that is the SG's department. And I don't want to speak wrongly on their behalf because I do understand we have an online, yes. So that is something that as well I would have to take back home, raise with them and probably see, because I mean, all the legislation and all those agreements pass through the Attorney General's office. So it will be something that I will definitely have to flag through the PS to pass on to the Attorney General, but I will pass to PS now on something, yeah.
Okay, very quickly, because we have still two more comments and Barbados before lunch.
Very, very, very quickly. Just to, because I'm listening to the questions and you're trying to put Solange under some fire there.
Yes.
But with regard to all the ICT equipment and the taxes and that kind of thing, it has a lot to do with the fact that, Trinidad realized that it was not where it was supposed to be, technology-wise, when COVID happened, right? So in order to try to bring everybody at the same time up to a certain standard and quickly, I think we felt that one of the best ways to do it would have been through eliminating that whole burden of taxes on that kind of electronic equipment. As it pertains to the different treaties that we do have a MOU with Estonia, as we would have mentioned before, and we also do have a digital economy partnership agreement, but that is with Chile, New Zealand, and Singapore at the moment, right? So we are heading in that direction. I mean, I agree that we may not be there yet, but we have been making a lot of strides in that direction.
Thank you. Chris?
Yes.
Just very quickly, just in the interest of time, I'll just keep mine short to a couple of comments, really. First of all, you talked about, first of all, great presentation, and I really like the focus on open data systems.
Yes.
Technology neutrality. For business, that's absolutely essential. And I also really like that point around collaboration around legal drafting. There's absolutely no reason why we should be all doing this on our own. Correct. When we can be collaborative, particularly around trade legislation. So my two comments quickly. One around citizen digital identities. Don't confuse that with legal entity identifiers for business in trade. Two completely different things. The LEI system for trade, again, is in that standards toolkit. It's the GLIFE system, globally recognized by G20 governments and regulators. So it's already there. It's cheap, 30 euros a year for businesses. It's not expensive at all. So don't forget that. That's super important. And then really a comment for all the presentations, really, don't forget that UNCITRAL Melita framework. If we don't get that in place, this trade transformation is not going to happen. We know that from experience everywhere in the world. It's the one thing that's holding up that transformation for the whole ecosystem. It's so, so important. So please don't forget that. And don't also forget that roadmap that I put up yesterday. That Melita framework is where goods and finance come together in an integrated environment. That's why we need that legislation. There's mention of payments, paperless, totally get it. Customs has been mentioned. But that Melita framework is the hinge point. We've got to get that in place. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. I'll take that home as well. Yes?
Thank you. And just final comment before we close. And this is not a problem that's unique to Trinidad and Tobago, but I know at one stage Trinidad was pretty advanced in its digital transformation agenda. I think that's where TT Connect and so on, the government portal, which unfortunately is not available the last couple of months.
We have TT Biz as well. We have iGov TT.
Yes.
We have some, no worries.
Of course you do, of course you do. And then unfortunately also in COVID, many of our countries set up online ED forms to enter the country, and unfortunately many have reverted back to the paper-based system. So it's really how do we find the continuity between political administration so that, if it's a strategy or policy that's working, that there's continuity, and even because they're coming out of these crises like COVID, that we maintain and we don't fall back into the comfort zone of the paper. So just more of a comment, not necessarily a question. And on that note, I want to thank Team Trinidad and Tobago for its presentation.
Thank you. I just have one question for DigiFind. Are we going to get financed? Remember, we came to you all for finance. We'll have another meeting.
Rodney will pay for it.
You'll get financed depending on who. Yeah.
Can we ask AV to put up their presentation on the screen, please? Thank you. From the first.
Special effects. Visual, yeah.
I want to put it back.
Declaration of interest. I am Trinidadian, but I must commend the Trinidad team. Solange did an excellent job. Now, last. Sometimes it's said last but not least, or save the best for last. We will see, as I am now going to invite the team Barbados. Very enthusiastic team Barbados to now take the podium and make its presentation. As you do, I'd just also like to indicate that we will have microphones so that in the presentation, should any of the other members of the team would like to add anything during the Q&A, you can be sure to do so.
Good morning all. All protocols, good afternoon, sorry. All protocols haven't been done on Monday, but I would still like to say welcome to the Honorable Attorney General from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Thanks for staying and listening to us. Thanks to the judges. Thanks to all of you. Good morning. Good afternoon, sorry. Right, our team, Barbados, is made up of Richie Bonet, Faye Seeley, Nicola Callender, Lisa Graves, Rodney Payne, Finidi Williams, Cindy Parwakill, June Paris, Joanne Clark, and I am Clifford Bostick. Now we're gonna, right, this one. Right, sorry, where is this going so far? Okay, so this afternoon I'm going to speak about consumer protection and competition, data protection, cybersecurity, trade, competition law, information communication technologies, finance, and national standards. For consumer protection, we do have the Fair Trading Commission that was established in about 2 decades ago, as well as the Telecommunications Act, which was also established in about 2 decades ago. And the Fair Trading Commission basically manages fair competition as well as consumer protection for all services in Barbados, for water, electricity, gas, ICTs, and telecommunications. And it is worthy to note that this came about because Barbados at that time, 2 decades ago, more than 2 decades ago, sorry, was part of became a member of the World Trade Organization, and the formation of consumerism and protection and competition protection was based on trade and Barbados punching above its weight to make sure that we were part of the World Trade Organization. The current status is that the Consumer Protection Act as well as the Fair Competition Act are really outdated. They're more than 2 decades old. The gaps and challenges represented here are one of quality assurance and quality control. In Barbados, we look forward to the days when the electricity company asks for a price hike, and the Fair Trading Organization invites the public, it invites businesses to actually object and to state their objections and be part of the determination of whether or not the price increase is merited and how it will be implemented, if at all. Also, some of the gaps and challenges represented are for products and services, and as I speak about products and services in consumerism in Barbados, the product is water, for example, electricity. The services are customer services from those organizations, and whether or not the consumer has any say in what takes place. And you will notice that in most cases, the consumer gets protection when there is fair competition taking place in the country. Also, some consumers do believe that they're not having the knowledge of how the service works or how the product works, what are their rights and privileges, how can they defend or object to increases or lack of better services for most of these consumer products. I'm talking about water, electricity, gas, and ICTs and telecommunications, and whether there is collusion, price fixing, and predatory pricing. And you will notice if you live in Barbados or you're in the CARICOM and you take a good look at Barbados, that water and electricity are still basically in a monopolistic position, as well as gas. But ICTs and telecommunications is very vibrant when it comes to competition. You will notice that there were at one point in time, about a decade ago, over 7 to 8 internet service providers on island. And you will notice that today, Barbados has launched local number portability to make the market much more competitive. And if you listen to the radio and the TV and WhatsApp and Instagram and so on, you will see that the competition has risen to the next level. You'll see both Flow and Digicel advertising more products and services. The recommendations for consumer protection and competition is simple, very simple. The consumer needs to have some sort of protection against predatory pricing and lack of better quality of service from these organizations. And the government plays a huge role in this. Barbados in 2019 did the first audit of mobile services in the Caribbean. And as a result of that, there was lots of recommendations that were fulfilled by the operators. But COVID in 2020 and 2021 also increased the demand for services not only in consumer services from ICTs and telecommunications, but also from the electric company, where of course most people were at home. They burn a lot more energy. Businesses were not necessarily closed down, but they were also operating remotely, and we saw the demand for energy and the demand for services from ICTs and communication increase, therefore making consumers a lot more unhappy because they were unable to do learning online easily without interruptions and so on. So the recommendation is to have more audits done, with the understanding that the Fair Trading Commission and the Ministry of Industry, Innovation, Science and Technology will work with them to create standards and quality of service standards, not only that represent what the consumer wants, but also what the providers are providing you with in the market. Data protection. We have launched or put in place our Data Protection Act back, I think was in 2019. I speak subject to correction. But that act has, as a result of the act, we have implemented Data Commissioner, the Data Protection Commissioner, sorry. The commission is to be established. It forms an integral part of what we want within our jurisdiction, not only in Barbados, but we want to extend it across the Caribbean, because there's still that zest by CARICOM and Barbados as a partner in CARICOM to have a single ICT space where intergovernmental transactions, as well as citizens within the various countries, could actually do business with the various governments very easily from at home or from abroad. And the challenges that we're faced with data protection are very simple. One, the commissioner is a one-lady show on her own. We have not been able to establish the human resources as well as the plans in place to make sure that they have the requisite skills, that there's sensitization right across Barbados, so that the regulations can be implemented and that everyone within the country can follow those regulations, so that you truly have data protection. And if you think about businesses with all the data they have on citizens and businesses, as well as the service providers who see that data transit or pass their networks from time to time, whether it's stored, whether it's free of bad or intrusive codes that can cause problems with cybersecurity, still is a problem that we have to solve. And of course, there is the lack of process and procedures for cross-border transfer flows. In other words, when a customer or a citizen overseas logs into a system, a platform or portal in Barbados and implements or puts in information that's critical to them, or also gathers information from the portal that's critical to Barbados, whether or not that data is secured and free of the hackers, as you and I know. The recommendations is, of course, first of all, making sure that the data commissioner has the requisite personnel to help her in her daily job of making sure that the registration procedure is right, the implementation of education and sensitization campaigns is done in a persistent manner so that the general public is aware, and we don't learn from a single presentation or a single set of presentations. We learn when our normal etiquette changes, when you know exactly what you need to do. And one of the examples that I refer to quite often is crossing the road as a child. We learned when you get to the crossroad, you look to the right, you look to the left, you look to the right again, to the left again, and as you're looking to the right and crossing, you're peeping at the left to make sure you don't get run over. So when we have that kind of, when we have developed that kind of skill set in us, so that whatever we're doing, we're checking on security, whether we are leaving an open book for anyone to hack into, or a laptop or a tablet or a phone, and then get into a network and cause havoc. When we reach that stage, then we truly know that we're in tune with cybersecurity. It doesn't mean it won't happen, but the chances of it happening is lower, the risk is lower. And remember that human beings are the softest spot for these kinds of things to happen. And of course, once we develop the sensitization and we have the registration process in place and the procedures to deal with cross-border data transfers and flows, then we know that we're on the go to get things done properly. Cybersecurity permeates all facets of our lives. We notice that the moment we move from paper to electronic, that anyone who has access to a network, whether it's directly via the internet or through a fixed wireless connection to the internet, or whether it's via satellite or some other means, I have a feeling that the next revolution, the fifth or the sixth revolution, will be when we start to transfer information by mind and thought, when they could not necessarily look at Rodney, but send a signal to Rodney to say, never send Barbados last to present anything. So the status of our cybersecurity is that we don't have legislation. I believe we'll be having a bill quite soon. We've been thinking about this for a long time and writing about it, but we don't have that legislation or bill in place at the moment. We do have, and this is the current status, we do have a strategy which is before the Cabinet of Barbados to be decided on. It's a strategic framework. It is not a very glossy, huge document that I've seen come out of Jamaica and I think out of Trinidad. But our plan is to have a framework approved and then go forward towards a work plan which shows over a 5-year, possibly a 10-year period, possibly a 15-year period, those projects that we will implement, going down towards the road of becoming more risk averse and also more competent to change. We do not believe that cybersecurity is a standing goalpost. We believe that it shifts from the left to the right and it gets wider and wider. So the guys involved in cyber and in hacking will get you at some point in time, but we have to move. Otherwise, they will keep us down, they will stop us from progressing. We have to we don't have education and sensitization programs in place that are consistent. We have done online training. We have done online training for children at primary school and secondary schools. We've had several online training at conferences like this for our nationals and persons in ICTs, as well as other sectors like the legal sector. We've had it for judges and lawyers. We've had it for members of the Attorney General's office on several occasions. We've had it for persons working in the Electoral and Boundaries Commission, several times sponsored by the OAS, but we have not developed the regulation and legislation yet. Next slide, right. Okay, so most of the gaps are common. There's no policy in place yet. It's still before the cabinet for agreement. And the staff, we have to make sure that all staff within all sectors of business in Barbados, in other words, all the ministries, departments, and agencies in Barbados must become cybersecurity and have their data privacy skills embedded so that it becomes part of their routine behavior. And of course, there's no common published policies and procedures as well that would come after we've gotten approval from the government of Barbados to proceed. The recommendations really is to upscale the cybersecurity talents and skills of the public service, as well as assist the private sector, because we noticed in Barbados that the private sector follows government. So when government fails to deliver, they fail to follow. When government succeeds in delivering, they follow. So we have to take the leadership, and you will notice that we've had several cyber attacks in the country, and our aim is to close that gap. It's not listed there, but we have done about 75% of the work required to establish a CSIRT, the Cybersecurity Incident Response Team in Barbados. We have the primary equipment in place. It's been tested, it works. We've had 2 sets of training thanks to the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, and see what the area officer for Barbados is here, for the Caribbean, is here with us as well. And the next step is to create the secondary site, which will be the same as the primary site, but in a different place, so that should we have any issues, we have a backup. And thirdly is to have business continuity by having a tertiary site. And again, we won't tell you where that will be, but it will be in a place where cloud technology exists, but where we do take care of sovereignty as well. And then our legislation and regulations is part of those low-hanging fruits that we have to take care of. So this is CERT been established, and the regulation and legislation be set up to make sure that we can handle cybersecurity within all the ministries in Barbados. Finance. One of the World Trade Organization's mandates or one of the tenets of the World Trade Organization, which I said to you, Barbados had established a connection with back 2 decades ago, was financial legislation, because finance is one of the areas that is lucrative for trade. It is products and services, and it's finance. It is also tourism. One of the services is tourism. Products and services could be sugar, bananas, vegetables, black belly sheep, all the various types of products that you can trade on the market, but also the financial services. And and Barbados wanted to make sure that we benefited from financial services as well. There is legislation out there, but there is the gap basically lies in cybersecurity. You know that we have in the Barbados government a payment platform. It is called EasyPay Plus, and you can find almost 100% of the services offered by government on that platform. In other words, you can log into the platform, choose a ministry, and then choose the type of service you want to pay for, the product you want to pay for, and you go from there. But we need additional security, cybersecurity for it. There needs to be staffing with the right skill sets, just not within the Ministry of Industry, Innovation, Science and Technology, but within all the ministries, departments and agencies, because that payment platform connects to those ministries for services. For example, you can log into EasyPay and get a police certificate of character. Most people in Barbados need that in order to get employment. But having paid for the service, then the system connects you to the police data cores, where they are, the process that they have, and so on. And that needs to be protected. And like my friends in Trinidad and Tobago, that was the department that had lots of paper, lots of procedures, lots of sensitive and very critical procedures as well. So not everyone could have access to it. So legislation needed to be changed to facilitate the police certificate of character being digitized or digitalized. In other words, the police now can tell where is the demand for police certificate of characters in the country. Who are the citizens who want these police certificate of character? All right, is it the high end, that is those in the middle class and higher revenue earning classes, or is it in the lower classes? They have all that information now. So guess what? They can plan to be more efficient. They can now take their resources and allocate their resources to the streets of Barbados. And this not to be funny, but this morning, in trying to get here early, I went past 80 kilometers an hour, and the police officer said, "Sir, you are at 101, and you can't get to Accra Beach in 10 minutes." So, to get back to the point, it is, they now know what are the things they need to control. So instead of having officers within the confines of a library with lots of files and so on, they put them on the streets to make sure that Senor Bostic does not drive too fast on highway, the ABC highway. Now, also, there's inadequate regulation by the regulators, and the regulators for finance are the central bank, and they have their attorneys who work with them, the Financial Services Commission, and there was a person here from that organization not too long ago, I think on Monday, and they regulate what they refer to as the non-financial agencies. Now imagine this. I'm not a lawyer, so I get lost sometimes. They're focusing on the credit unions in Barbados, who, by the way, have quite a bit of revenue. They own quite a bit of assets, cash, a lot of cash. They are the persons who you go and put your money with, and you borrow basically, but you have savings and you have other types of investment tools, but they have a significant amount of cash and assets. And the FSC, the Financial Services Commission's concern with the central bank is that if there's a crash with the credit unions, it could bring down the economy. And so they have implemented some changes and procedures, which means that the directors in those credit unions are now responsible if something goes wrong. My apologies. If something goes wrong, they are liable and they can be prosecuted and locked up for causing the economy to crash by not managing those funds properly. These rules and regulations are not very familiar by the credit unions, and they have implemented some things that will change that, such as doing courses online. And once you've done the courses online, every year they know that you are aware of what's happening, and that's one of the gaps that were filled. The Public Account Committee is unable to convene due to the current status, and of course, outdated legislation, which appears not to be a priority, but this is that accounting organization or committee which makes sure that the accounting for the country is done properly, that there is accountability and responsibility for the public funds. So coming out to a workshop like this, someone will be checking to see if we followed the protocols, if we follow the procedures, and if we haven't, then there's some penalty to be paid. It's as simple as that. And so the recommendations are basically to make sure that the current legislation is reviewed to determine exactly what we need to embrace in a digital economy. We will look towards the region and the international markets to see what they have in place, but we will not take, and there's I'm speaking there already to our lawyers in the crowd, in the workshop. The lawyers in Barbados, and I believe in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Antigua and Trinidad and Tobago, will not take, let's say, for example, the hit car legislation, which was done in conjunction with the ITU, the CTU, and see Mrs. Madden here as well. A long time ago, more than probably close to two decades ago, but the comments that came back from the Attorney General's office was that we can't take the HIP car and activate it in our communities because the lawyers need to see what is it that you were trying to achieve, as opposed to the model text, as opposed to the prescription, as opposed to the legislation. So when we look at legislation from international and regional organizations, we have to be extremely careful that we understand clearly, and this is a problem because the technocrats, really technically minded persons, do not understand legal drafting. As a matter of fact, legal drafting is not liked by lots of lawyers. There are very few who like it, and so it is a big problem. We have to find a solution for it, and one of the solutions is that all the groups get together to formulate that legislation or regulation that we need for harmonization, which is critical for us to CARICOM. So one of the recommendations is to have a HIT CAR 2 done for the region with the same support from ITU, from Cleveland in the back, and from Mrs. Madden in the front, as well as the OAS and any other, the EU and those folks, so that we can have better legislation in place that suits us. And we need to document our roadmaps. The CTU, the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, has a roadmap which covers off legislation and regulations as well. It's an in-depth document, and we need to we have it already, and we need to put some focus on it. There must be clear policies so that all the ministries, departments, and agencies understand exactly what we need to do. So we need to have meetings with them. We've started this in Barbados with the technical guys, because those are the technical guys are the most difficult ones to get legislation passed, because they only see the technology piece of it. The legislation is dealt with by the lawyers. And we need to communicate our intent to all the stakeholders, and of course, design that implementation plan, which should be something that excites our folks, all of us, so that we see there's a clear path towards success and getting ourselves out of some of these holes that we're in. ICTs and telecommunications. This forms the bedrock basically to most things that we have to do. there was a time when communication was just by voice. So when you spoke somewhere out in London or Africa or Australia or the United States, someone in Barbados would hear you if they had a phone to their ear. Today, it is invisible, it's online, it goes from one device to another device, and we just basically activate these devices and we look and we can see and hear and so on and so forth. It forms the bedrock to how information is shared, how products and services can be distributed, how trade can be implemented. And I must tell you that the status of our regulation and legislation is dated as well. Our Telecoms Act is 22 years old. The Fair Trading Commission's acts for consumer protection as well as for competition regulation in Barbados is dated over 22 years old as well. And we talk about best practice. We understand good practice because sometimes the best practice, when you look at what's out there internationally, it's good practice for them. It won't be best practice for us until we tweak it to suit our environment, to suit our economies, our culture, and the way we do business in Barbados. And of course, it's prohibitive. And one of the reasons it's prohibitive, that's in terms of the cost, is because most legal personnel don't like drafting. Drafting is one of those boring things to do, I'm told. I heard you. Right. But somehow they're able to translate that to high costs, because if you want me to do it, you got to pay me to do this thing. The gaps, the cyber gaps, basically are simple. The escalation or the process of technology advancing so swiftly results in the legislation being far behind. And if you're smart and you decide to implement the legislation before the technology gets there, when the technology gets there, then you have to change, you have to tweak or amend the legislation simply because the technology sometimes brings things into place that you never thought about before. I'll give you a typical example. Barbados decided on implemented a Barbados identity system, and we call it the National Identity Project. Let me go slowly. And before that project was started or got into full gear, we went to implement legislation called the Barbados Identity Management Legislation, or Barbados Identity Management Act of 2019. The project continued, and today folks have a digital ID card that you can go anywhere and you can show, and a police officer can scan it and know that it is you. That you can go renew your driver's license because the system knows that it is you. You can use it in the banks, the system knows that it is you. But coming next will be a remote app that you can have on your devices that will also identify you. And when that technology is adopted by us, guess what? We have to amend the regulations related to the Barbados Identification Management Act. Yeah, thank you very much. So the gaps, as you could see, are representative of what we lack in terms of legislation and regulations, and because of the cost of it, and because we do not, this is something that we haven't done before, and we need the big countries like the United States of America, the European Union, the Australians, in our local environment, we need Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica to help us in the OECS and Barbados and all the rest of the Leeward Islands. But we have to make sure that when we design the strategies and the roadmaps, that we implement them with sense and know that you cannot walk fast and deliver at pace, but you need to be focused and have a strategy that you can follow. And secondly, we need to make sure that we engage the international agencies for good practice and good practices, making sure you adopt it to your economies, to your societal traits that you have, as well as to our needs as well. And others. Now, I knew this would happen, and I knew I would get someone giving me a red light, but the others relate to Barbados national standards. We have national standards in our country and we have ISO, I think it's 9001 certification. What they're looking to do now is to get all the ministries, departments, and agencies involved. That is the people like myself and like most of us you see in the back, as well as all those supporting staff officers who work within the various ministries. And I think they're having a training session in March, and at the end of the training session, if we're all successful, we will be standardized and given a certificate, which you have to renew on a yearly basis. And at this time, I want to thank you before you chase me off the floor.
Go Team Barbados. Okay, Nivea, we're going to start with you.
I just want to be really quick because I sense the room getting a little quieter the closer to 1 o'clock we get, and I realize that Vashti is spoiling them because, you know, she doesn't eat the lunches, but she makes sure that everybody else is getting, you know, 3-course meals. Yeah. So very quickly, I liked your presentation, how you split up the different sections. I noticed that you gave us a lot of information on the internal data protection, cybersecurity, and so on, but I'm coming back to the same thing again. What about external? How are you trying to modernize or ease your business from the customs side, from the access into Barbados? I liked your plans for the cross-border flows and so on, but just from that side of coming in, seeing that apparently my role today is to talk about trade facilitation. So that was just a short question I had for you.
Right, thank you very much for a short question. What I can tell you is that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs plays a great role in this, and I can see Kay Seeley may want to take a stab at that. Go ahead, Kay.
Thank you very much. And I can let you know that for Barbados, we are actively seeking to implement all of the provisions under the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement. In addition, we have implemented a Secuda World by Customs, and we hope within the next year or two, we can introduce an electronic single window. And as it relates to the port, I can let you know that there is a port community systems project in place, and we're looking to enhance efficiency and facilitate real-time transfer of data and information between the public and private sector. So those are some of the initiatives that we're looking as it relates to trade facilitation. And also, as it relates to the HS, the harmonized system, we're keeping current. So Customs is currently piloting an activity where we're looking to implement the HS 2022 later this year. Thank you.
Yes, and I would just like to add that Kia, in her capacity, also meets with most of the ministry's officials whenever these trade agreements come up for review, requiring updates from the various ministries. And that's one of the things that keeps us remembering and understanding that it's about trade as well.
Yeah, just a couple of positive points, I think, on the presentation. Thank you very much, by the way. Was that emphasis on public-private sector collaboration on the legal framework? I thought that was a really well-made point. I totally support that. I think the recognition that financial innovation is coming from the private sector, absolutely 100%. They're way out in front of governments, and I think that's just acknowledging that is really, really important. We need to catch up from the public sector side. And then I particularly like the point on documenting a roadmap with timelines. That's music to the ears of any industry. We need concrete action, concrete time frame. We don't want lots of reviews. We just want action, especially in this digitalization space. So I think that's really, really well made point. I like that. My only comment was around data. You made a lot of points around the sort of data, and data flow is obviously a very complex area for lots of governments. Please be mindful of B2B data versus B2C data. There are common threads across the two, but 80 to 90% of all data flow is B2B data. but 90% of all the issues are in the B2B space. Is that privacy issue, those sorts of issues, the Facebook issue as it's often called. You know, and we've got to guide the political classes through that, you know, navigate them through that argument. Otherwise, all that happens is we all get bogged down in B2C. Business get intensely frustrated because we're not making any progress on the B2B, which is a much more important piece from a trade, you know, business point of view. So it's just trying to be mindful of those two things, and where you can separate the two, make progress on B2B, don't get stuck in the B2C, and we all have to wait for that before we can make progress with business.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate that, because you're absolutely correct. We were focused a lot on citizens to big businesses, whether it's government or private sector, as well as small businesses to government, as well, and large businesses to government. But the focus on business to business is not there right now. So thanks very much for that.
Thank you very much, and great presentation, and really sorry we had to cut you off, but you stand between us and lunch. So like with other presentations, and like Chris, I really like the roadmap, the clear policies, the communication to stakeholders, and the implementation plan. And that fits in with the comment that I made for the first group, which is when you're looking to reform your legal and regulatory framework, when you're looking to go towards the digital transformation, you really need to think about the sustainable financing for the upskilling and the scaling of efforts. You talk about the working group. We all know that costs money. So I think when I mentioned, do you have a pitch? I think your roadmap, your clear policies, the communication and the implementation plan, those are very, very important so that you can really pitch it to potential donor agencies. So it's more of a comment than a question.
Thank you very much. And it's interesting that your comment is like that on the donor groups. We're currently looking in midst to engage a company who we saw in Suriname a few days ago, who has offered to assist governments in CARICOM with getting projects done that they funded, that they could not get the funding locally. And we are exploring that as well. You may not be aware of this, but we are signed up in the metaverse, and we have to do a lot of work to help our stakeholders understand what it means and how we can fund that, so that Barbados, again, we punch in way above its weight, like we did back in 20 years ago at the WTO.
Thank you, Clifford. You and your team represented Barbados well. I unfortunately have some inside knowledge. And unfortunately, I know that even with the support of the OAS, the cybersecurity strategy has been very long in the making. I think probably more than 5 years, even with the support of the OAS. And I'm wondering, what can we do? And I know you said this with Cabinet, I believe, which will then give formal approval. So that's just the development. We still have to move to implementation. So what can we do to accelerate these sort of timelines? Even if, sir, it took a while as well with ITU support. What can we do to shorten that? Because we can't, in reality, take 5 years, even on the strategy development side, let alone implementation. So how can we address those shortcomings?
Very good question, Rodney. From where I stand and sit, the one thing that we didn't have was financial support. For example, we formed a group called the Cybersecurity Working Group, which is made up of professionals, both in private sector as well as in the public sector, as well as some persons who are overseas, actually. And they sit to discuss with us cybersecurity and the action we need to take. What we didn't have was budget. For example, in our ministry, in the Ministry of Industry, Innovation, Science and Technology, we did not have a director of cybersecurity. We still don't have one, and a team to work in cybersecurity. So finance is support in terms of government finances is what's missing. Secondly, we did spend a long time working on the strategy as well as the work plan, or the plans that we would roll out across 5, 10, 15 years. Again, we had support from all the ministries and government, the private sector, the cybersecurity working group. But what we saw that was missing was support. So if we were, let's say, in a meeting like this face to face. And the last one was in 2018 or 2019 that we met in a military compound basically to have that meeting. What we lacked was again support, just to feed the folks and give them some refreshment. We were beggars. You couldn't imagine what we went through to get that done. So I think financing seemed to be the last thing that we need to get done. And I believe that support from the European Union or from bankers in the US or wherever they are to give us some funding, not give, but to loan us some funding, provided that we reach the targets of producing the plans as well as implementing the low-hanging fruit would help us.
I would just finally say that the case of, my experience with Barbados has convinced me that really we ought to, at a regional level in particular around cybersecurity, we need really to lean more heavily on institutions like CARICOM impacts and give it the resources, in particular like around certs and about the response to cyber threats and so on, because as you know, it's very costly once a breach has happened to actually bring the resources on board. And there's a global shortage in cybersecurity skills. So I think that is one particular area where I think we can benefit from greater regional harmonization. But on that, I want to thank you because I believe we're just past, in fact, our lunch time. And I would want, again, a round of applause for Barbados.
I'd like to invite the Barbados team to come to the podium for your picture.